Welcome, everyone, back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I am super excited to get into this conversation today with Ben Harris, the fair guy. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited.
Yo, thanks for having me. I know we're just gonna jump straight in, and I just have a feeling some nuggets. I can feel them. I'm not sure what they are yet, but I'm excited to uncover the gems along the way.
I see them too, and I'm like gonna mine them and I'm gonna pull them out. And I'm excited.
Well, I love that because one of my favorite quotes is actually by Joseph Campbell, and it's the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Mm,
And I mean, that's just the premise, for a lot of what I do for my course, for basically everything, just because I mean, that's just a foundational statement for life. And so I always use, like, in texting people or clients or whatever, I use the diamond emoji because it
mm,
is like you're going into the cave, right? And it's like you're getting the gem, but it's like you have to go into it first, but you're terrified. And so I like,
mm.
just to relate back to what we're feeling, that's just always what I visualize.
Oh, I love that so much. I definitely want to really get into the fear and how that like whole came about as part of your journey. I think it's so fascinating and it ties so well with the Vedas, which is why I was really excited about this conversation. But before we go there, I do want to hear specifically, how do you connect with the divine feminine? Because it's something I ask all my guests, and I especially love having the men on here really being able to share how they connect to that part of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I love that question, especially for men too. Fortunately for me, I grew up around a lot of women, like single mom, little sister. It was just us most of the time. Um, and so it's interesting that we're talking about this now. I had a session with an intuitive healer last week, and we actually talked about the feminine, so the masculine side of my family, but the feminine energy within it,
Mm,
and how that has been misconstrued in certain ways. And so why I bring this up is because, like, I have felt connected to it for a lot of my life. Like, I'm naturally soft and go with the flow and um caring and emotional. And that doesn't just mean that's, I'm sure you and a lot of the listeners know, like, that's just not the feminine, right? But it's me reconnecting to it more deeply has been, honestly, in my partnership with feeling. I didn't realize how afraid of feeling I was.
mm,
And until I remember when we were first, started dating and getting intimate, she would always like put her hand on my chest and just say, like, open, open.
mm,
And so for just practices like that, I mean, we're both always working on our dynamics and how we want to show up. But it's like, I just remember what that moment of her hand on my chest and telling me to open and trust that, because I feel like for me, and I see this in a lot of the world, I wouldn't even call it the divine masculine. I would say probably it's a distorted version, feels safer or more reliable. And that divine feminine feels like unknown and
mhm,
wild. And so to even just embrace that part of myself and in life, and to, it is, I'm kind of going off a tangent here, but just like what I'm feeling, like I understand why for years, whether you want to call it the patriarchy or whatever, has um repressed that so much. Like, I honestly understand it because it is so powerful.
mm,
And so it's like I've just seen it. I felt it within myself. I've been a beneficiary of it, of my partner and like other women around me. And just to like connect to that true divine feminine, like, is, honestly, it's literally life giving. And even after just seeing birth and that process, just put me in awe of just like, damn, like, I know I'm powerful, but that is like, I'm not sure if I'm that powerful. You know, it's just just life, like literally life giving. And to me, that's the divine feminine. I'm just so nurturing, and but it's also like the destruction, right? It's the beauty. It's like it's everything. So that's kind of a smorgasbord of how I connect with it. But that's how I feel like it is. Like
Mm.
it's everything, and it's beautiful, and it's also scary. It's
Hmm.
scary too.
For sure. Was hoping and had a feeling that you would bring your counterpart into this. I recently had another male Ayurvedic practitioner, and he said that she and his partner really helps him to connect with the divine feminine as well. And I love that practice of her intuitively knowing when maybe you're closing off, when you weren't feeling the emotions, and her being able to just naturally, like, so probably intuitive, she wasn't thinking anything about it, just like right away putting her hand on her heart, getting you to feel and to open. And I also love that idea of the feminine is this cosmic void, right? Like the womb, where all anything is possible. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is like all of that fear, like you were saying, going into the dark cave is so scary. Yet when you're able to like really surrender and release into it, it feels like this like cocoon where you're so held because now you're trusting in all the possibility that is really there. And it feels collectively like we're really in this like, I mean, it just what happens nature cyclically when we go into the winter in that cocoon phase. But we are collectively coming to this place of like more deep trust into that unknown as you know we start to get to the more towards the light. Yeah, that's just what I've been feeling collectively in the energy as well. So I love that you brought that up too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll just, I mean, I've already said it, but yeah, just to echo, like, yeah, like the womb space. It is like it's the infinite unknown, but it's actually what we're already in, you know? And so, and again, like you're right, right? It connects deeply to fear, like what we're all afraid of, but that's what we're already in.
Mm.
And so, just to even release the illusion of that there is anything but that,
Hmm.
and to trust in that. And I heard something. I've been thinking about doing a darkness retreat, and then I know it's been
Oh my
calling to
gosh,
me.
me too. I love that you brought that up.
And I watched someone talk about their experience, and they were scared of, obviously, as most people would be hesitant to go into days of darkness, of talking to no one and doing nothing but just sitting with yourself. And and they said they were actually so surprised of how the darkness held them.
Mm.
Right? They were so afraid of it, but it actually turned into an ally of they felt like held
Mm.
and comforted, right? Of what you said, like in that womb of just like held and comforted. And I thought like, yeah, that's so cool. Like that would be my intention of going in to like to be held by that.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, that's exactly what I've been called to it as well. And yeah, I guess I'll refrain from going into a whole tangent on darkness retreats. I want to talk about where this idea of fear and it kind of being, not kind of, it being the core principle for the work that you do, being a part of your dharma. When did that show up first on your journey where you were like, okay, this is something that I need to pay attention to? And you started to realize and become aware of how fear maybe was holding you back in your life or was becoming a great teacher for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the more and more and more and more I do this, one of the reasons I love it so much is like it's endless learning. Like I learn more about fear every single day and how it's connected to everything we do. Like I learn, like just the other week, I was like referring back to my childhood in a therapy session. I was like, damn, I didn't know how afraid I was
Mm.
at a lot of the time. Not all the time, right? But like, I didn't realize how actually afraid I was. And so, but I didn't realize that because I'm, of course, protecting myself to not feel like that's the truth. But one of the first conscious moments that I connected with fear is so when I was in high school, I actually um, found music. I found hip hop music, and it was completely by accident. Like one of my friends was like, "Yo, Ben, like you should make a rap song with me." I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Okay, sure." And I remember I was in math class and I just wrote this ridiculous verse with this rhyming, like, pan, man, just like all these random, like, not intricate rhymes or schemes at all. But I fell in love with it. And so I made my first CD. I sold it in the halls. I sold it at lunch. You know, made a little bit of money. And then someone approached me to perform at a school assembly. And that was my first feeling with like an oh shit, like
Hmm.
because I was so called to it, but I was also terrified. So that was the first moment where I felt like I couldn't say no. Like like I was almost out of breath. I can still like take myself back to that moment and I can see the girl who was asking me to perform and I was just like, "Yes." But I was like I was terrified to do it. But that was that moment where looking back I was like, "Oh, like those things that I'm scared to do are actually like is my soul's calling, like my heart's calling to
Hmm.
expand into a greater expansion of myself." And so doing that and just a few other things. And then on my 19th birthday with music, the guy who I was rapping, he gave me a book. And the premise of the book was actually about fearlessness. And what it was like the secret to success is doing what you're afraid of. And I was like, oh, I get it. Like I was doing it already. I just didn't have like the logical like reasoning behind it. And so once I read that book, it just clicked for me. And so I literally just started chasing everything I was afraid of.
Hmm.
Seriously everything. And so starting at 19, I've just been on that path of anytime I felt afraid, I know I have to do it. Not for the sake of just um like some people misconstrue that, right? Of like if I'm scared to jump off a cliff, do I have to do it? It's like no, right? It's like because you
Totally.
don't really care about that. Like, but are you afraid to, raise your hand in class or to ask that person out or to put yourself out there or to open yourself in a relationship? Like the things you actually deeply care about that you would regret not doing. That's how I view as like fear as a compass. Like it's showing us where to go if we want to grow. And so throughout the years, I just started to do that. And then when I left my corporate job, I was a director at a finance company. I left in 2019 and I had a different business idea that I was quitting for. And then that business idea ended up failing. And then I also invested money into crypto and I thought that was going to make me money. I ended up losing $40,000. And so I was in debt without a job and a failed business. And I was like, oh, damn. Like, what do I do? And that's just, this goes back to the cosmic void of trust, too. But I just had a feeling I knew I was going to be okay. And I remember people calling me crazy, and just like feeling their projections, which honestly I was. And still am. Like, a lot of the things I do don't make logical sense. But in that moment, I was like, I just know it's going to work out.
Hmm.
And then I just kept kind of doing things and I started my own membership. And then I realized finally, I was like, oh, I want to be a coach. And before I thought coaches were cheesy. I thought like, who are you to tell other people what to do? Like, you know, like like I just had it was looking back at it now, I know it was my own insecurity. But finally I got this inkling and to I did this retreat and I hosted my first retreat in San Diego of March of 2020 and I had a bunch of people coming to facilitate, but because it was beginning of the pandemic scare, the world hadn't shut down yet, but people were really starting to get like nervous about it, that some people didn't show. And so it had a void in the program of like, okay, well, what are we going to do this day? And so on that day, I didn't know what to do, but I got inspiration that morning to do a workshop about fear. And so doing that workshop that day, something clicked. And I did a couple other workshops after that in my membership. And I started talking about it more on social media. And then I just got this download literally the same month that the world shuts down, obviously because of fear. That it was just like the fear guide just came into my awareness. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, that's it.
Mm.
And so then I was sitting in meditation one day. I remember, the world is shut down. I'm at my mom's because in 2020 I was nomadic, so I didn't have a place to stay. So I went back to my mom's, and I remember I bought a mattress off Amazon, like sleeping on this mattress on the twin mattress on her floor. And I was just in meditation and I just asked, like, am I on the right path? And it was like,
Mm.
boom, just like lightning struck me. And I was like, okay, I am. And so that's the moment I decided to go all in. And I just rebranded everything. I said, I'm a coach now. And I also realized that I have so much experience with fear. And even in the corporate world, I had, almost a decade of experience of coaching people, which I thought it was to help them. It was through their problems and to reach goals, but really how I view that, the obstacle is fear. And I didn't realize that's what I was helping them do. And so just all these things started to click. And then I rebranded and I signed 4 clients in a week. And so that just confirmed my question of like, am
Mm.
I on the right path? Because obviously there's something there, you know?
Right.
And like it's just all organic. And I was like, okay, like we're running with this. So that was, of course, there's been many things since then and grown a
Hmm.
lot in the past few years. But that was like the journey of coming to know that like fear is a thing. And honestly, I didn't know how much of a thing it was because even if you look at my human design, I have a gift for feeling and seeing fear differently than most people.
Mm.
And so I didn't realize it was a thing. One, because my human design, and then two, because I've been practicing for, over a decade of just bravery and getting in the practice. And so fear didn't have like a tight grip on me. And I didn't realize it was such a thing until I rebranded. And then all these people started telling me and talking about all the things. I'm like, oh, damn, like this is a thing. And so the past few years, I've just been really, really diving and trusting the universe and life. Just, it's like, it's not me. Like, I didn't one day just say, like, what should my niche be? Or what's missing in the market? It was just a completely guided thing. And I've stumbled into it and I'm learning with it. Like, I'm being guided and shown as I go.
Totally. I'm so happy that you connected it back to your earliest memories of it, because that's really what Dharma is that it's not like I'm ready to do my career now, I'm stepping to my Dharma. It's like
Yeah.
this is your life's work. This is what you've known and done your whole life. That the offering might change from time to time, but at the heart of it, of what you're doing, it's always been the same. So yeah, it was in finance before, there before, and I love that you truly what I see as the opposite of fear, because in the Vedas, why I actually was so drawn to your work was because of what I found to be true in myself. Every single time I was extremely fearful of something,
Hmm.
it became so evident that that was exactly what I had to do in order to go on to the next part of my journey. That
Yep.
like you said, it's a compass. It was like, oh well, this is easy now because I know and sometimes it'd be like, oh, gosh, now I know this is what I have to do. And I would even hear myself say it as part of my human design, actually, is a throat chakra and how that really is connected. My voice is connected to my truth. And I would say things like, I would never do that. And then as soon as I catch myself and I'd hear myself say that, I was
Yeah.
like, oh God, foot stuck in my mouth. Like, I know that's exactly what I need to do. So that's why initially I was so drawn to it. And then I really connected it to the Vedas because a lot of the work that I do is with the chakras. And that first chakra, I think you could relate basically any shadow or any type of blockage down, distill it down to fear. That's
Right.
the shadow side of the root chakra. And the other side of that is trust. So your journey has all been, how can I really learn to trust myself throughout all of this? And when you were saying, oh, I seem like I got so many dead ends, it was like, how can I trust my journey even more, even though it seems like everything to everyone else, it seems like my life's blowing up, but this is actually the best opportunity because it's teaching me to go more in Dharma and more in the direction that is going to really feed my soul.
Yeah. I mean, amen to that. I know that because I talk a lot about it. I mean, that's all I talk about is I'm gonna face it, right? As like because that is my dharma. I know it's gonna be reflected back to me, and I'm gonna have to refine it again and again and again. And just to echo that, like that's definitely what I felt. And it is, and I love how you said, because it is the base, right, of any blockage, of any resistance, of any, like, our first primal, like, biological need as a human is to just survive. And that's, there's many different levels and sides to fear, right? But on a just a biological level, it's like if it feels unsafe, then it feels like a threat to my existence. It feels like a threat to my life. And that's what trauma is, right? That's what
Right.
blockages is. That's what projecting into the future, if something bad might happen to me, nervousness, anxiety, stress, like anything that is a quote unquote lower emotion, like on this scale, if you get to the root of it, right, it feels like it's threatening your survival because that's when your nervous system gets activated and needs to protect you from something. And so, yeah, that's why I love it so much, because it really is, it's the root. And so when you address that, when you, that's where trust comes in, that's where love comes in, that's where freedom comes in, that's where everything, like, I have found, and it never ceases to surprise me. Honestly, it never ceases to surprise me after how many people I've seen go through the stuff, like whether it's one on one or just listening to a podcast or courses or retreats or whatever. I'm like, damn, this shit works. Like,
For
because
sure.
they're addressing the thing that most people are too afraid to address. And that's where the freedom is. And that goes
Yeah.
back to the quote of, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And even if you just start paying attention to movies or books or just anything, like, a lot of media is like around fear, even just like the stories we tell. I mean, it's, that's part of the hero's journey too. um like, just people don't realize, like, how intertwined fear is into everything. And so when you learn how to navigate it, it doesn't mean that the fear goes away. And I think that's another big misconception,
Mm.
is people often come to me as like, Ben, how do I become fearless? So I'm like, well, first, you don't.
Mm.
Right? Because it's, and I probably don't say that at the beginning, right? Because that would be like, well, what's the, actually I do. Because I don't want to BS people of like, and I feel like that kind of stops people in their tracks for a minute of like, wait, what? Like, I thought that's what I'm coming here for. I'm like, no, dude, like, you're coming here to love it, to like befriend it and to accept it and to use it as a guide, and to like, because for you to be fearless, right, is to essentially avoid it. Like,
Mm.
that's what that would essentially
Right.
be mean. That would be saying like, I don't want to be happy anymore. That would say I
For
don't want to
sure.
feel sadness. That's like, so it's not about that. It's about learning how to navigate it and use it as a tool, and not get stuck on it or obsessed with it. Just allow it to be there as it needs to be there. And like, it's a completely just redefining, reshaping, liberating tool and perspective to learn about.
I'd imagine since trauma is fear, that it is a really sensitive subject for people, especially if they haven't tapped into understanding what their own personal traumas are. And I imagine you
Right.
get a lot of resistance there if they haven't done past trauma work. And it can be super confronting and triggering and so avoidant. And I'm just, how do you navigate that? Because you're literally touching like the most sensitive part of their body and poking it.
Yeah, right. And I feel like, honestly, I'm still learning. I mean, I know I always will be. It's frustrated me for a long time, I'll be honest, because it was like I saw a lot of people self-sabotage, right? Of like, and I took it personally. And it's like, because I know it's like, yo, I have this answer. It's not like I have the answer to fix you. It's, I know this thing will completely change your life, because that's why you're drawn to it. That's why you're scared of it. Um, that's why you don't want to do it. And so but like you said, I'm literally poking at the most painful part, right? And fear is run, it's avoidance, it's flee, it's freeze, it's hide and avoid at all costs. So I've definitely gotten better at realizing like people are going to come when they're ready. and it's not my job to. I've gotten better at dressing it up, um, but at the same time, I know it's my job to not dress it up too much, if that makes sense. Like I've tried different marketing things, and it's funny, right? Because it's like even when you look at marketing, like a lot of the things are like you have to address the pain points and use fear, which is so ironic.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, like communicating and and building trust with people. But it's like I don't want to beat around the bush too much because I know that's part of the process. People need to be able to say yes to the fear because that is one of the biggest pieces of the transformation is knowing that you're literally looking at the thing you don't want to look at. Whether you want to call it shadow work or trauma, inner child, whatever you want to dress it up as, ultimately you're looking at what you're afraid of. And so that's like I've just found when I talk about it directly because I'm not like dressing it up in this form or fashion that it does trigger people. Um, but again, it's like I know that's just refining me and allowing it's just like refining how I present it and allowing it to be a safe space. And you said trust. And I know a lot of people are listening and watching, and it's not my job to even just like get clients, right? Like I know like I am running a business and like that's something I've reframed completely. Like I'm not just here to like be like completely drain myself. Like I don't think that's serving anybody. But at the same time, what I'm here is so much more important than that. And I know I'm taken care of in that way and I'm learning for myself. So just like a long story short of knowing that like people are building trust within themselves as they're learning about fear. And I'll probably never know about some of the ways that this podcast or this post has like helped people because I still get people all the time that say like I want to work with you or people I work with will say like I was so afraid to reach out to you, which makes sense. But that's part of the
Hmm.
transformation is to do what they're afraid of. So just allowing that to happen on their own terms, because that's where the transformation is to, come from that courageous heart-centered place and just to trust the process and know that they're on their own timeline and I'm not there to control it.
Mm. Yeah, that's really powerful for healers to hear. And I talk about that often is this emotional responsibility that we take for others. And,
Yeah.
I think that especially as healers, when we're more empathic and sensitive, that we feel like it's our duty and our job to fix or have a solution when it's just completely not up to you. And it's your trust, like you said, and faith in your dharma and what your offering is and what you know it is that's part of that person's process. And like you put your hands up and it's totally up to them on their way. And that people pleasing, I'm noticing, I'm just refining that even more and more with myself of even what type of content you want to share. Like, yeah, it's so easy. I could look at my clients' pain points and I could speak to that. And now I'm thinking like, well, what is the art that like I want to share with the world? Like what brings me joy to like really express myself and my voice? How is that really the piece of devotion to my dharma rather than me trying to congeal and understand what it's always about my clients' needs? And there definitely is a balance here, but
Hmm.
yeah, those people pleasing tendencies that come in, I think is really important for healers to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, it's both, you know, and I feel like the alignment comes when you do both.
Mm,
When it's
definitely.
like when you find that sweet spot of like this is for me and for them because it's really because probably if we're trying to do it for us then it's like we're trying to run from something or we feel frustrated with something and like if we're trying to just do it too much for them then we're probably stuck in our heads too of trying
For
to
sure.
make money or run a business or whatever and so and nothing's wrong with either of those but like that sweet spot of being in the flow of this is for me and for other people honestly, like I have had moments of that, and it's literally just like complete bliss. It's like, oh my God, like I'm
Mm,
so in my purpose more than anything. I had an experience like that, um, like a few weeks ago in a launch. It was crazy. It literally felt like 2.5 days of pure ecstasy because I was just
mm,
like I just hit this sweet spot of I wasn't holding back anymore. And because what I was doing, what you're just mentioning of like expressing myself, and then it hit the spot of what other people are feeling and wanting, and it just like was this beautiful thing to just like be like I felt like I was just so connected to the divine because I
mm,
was and am, but in that moment, like, more so than ever. And I felt it, and it was just like, because it is both. Like, it's hard to explain of why and how it can be both, right? Because we think that business can't be that, or like healing can't be that, or dharma can't be this or that. But like having it be both, like hitting that sweet spot is so freaking cool.
mm. That's so beautiful. I kind of want to go into this theme of the dichotomy of, you mentioned earlier, something you fear but like you really really want, and I talk about this all the time with my community. And what's coming up right now is when I work with women when they first start to begin their spiritual business, and there's this fear of like, I really want this and I want this to support me full time. At the same time, I'm terrified of what will happen when I actually get that. Will I lose relationships? Will I be able to
Hmm.
maintain it? Whatever the story is that comes up for them. And then there's the whole piece of like, I really want to make this amount of money, but like, but can I doing that with intuitive gifts? Like,
Hmm.
there's the whole money piece behind that. So, how can fear hold healers back from stepping into this, from making the money that they want to be making and get accessing that level of nourishment, but at the same time they desire it so deeply but feel like it's so intangible?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you just named, we could go on and on for days, right? But I would just encourage people, like, literally just make a list of why can't I?
Mm,
Just literally just say, like, why isn't this possible? Or why can't I do it? Or um, even if you have a fear of success, I feel like a great question, or if is just like, what will happen when, right? Like, once I make the money, or once I'm successful, or once I'm expressing myself fully, what bad things will happen? And that usually tells me like, okay, well, this is what I'm afraid of from like happening when I am that fully expressed version of myself. So it's literally just like, just make a list of like what you don't want to happen or the perceived things that could happen, and just start paying attention. Like, if you just spend 1, 2, or 3 days writing down anytime you feel anxious or nervous or projecting into the future or stuck or overwhelmed or paralyzed, you'll find out very quickly that it's probably like, damn, like I'm actually more afraid more than I thought, because your mind is can always, and people might have heard this before, but we live our life 95% subconsciously. And so like that's a lot. That's like more, way more than most. Most of our time is spent subconsciously. And so what that means is you're automatically, without you even knowing it, looking and projecting into the world and of all the things that could go wrong. And your brain is literally wired for negative thinking because we're physical creatures that want to stay alive. And I had a client this morning, actually. It was pretty cool. And she has done all this work, made tons of progress, and then she went and visited her family, went back home, like to another country. And she realized, she's like, that, all their projections about her life and stuff. And she realized she noticed her brain was looking for evidence to support what they were saying, because it was like, because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to look for the things that are scary to protect you from it. And so just become aware of just a little bit. just start writing a few things down a day, and you'll start to see like, oh damn, like I am actually a lot of the time in a state of anxiousness or stress. I'm in survival, looking for something to go wrong so I can protect myself from. And I feel like that will tell yourself pretty quickly of what's holding yourself, like what's holding you back.
Definitely. Yeah, awareness is always the first step. And it's so interesting to notice that really coming from that third eye view, because like you said, so much of it's just automatic, you don't even realize. Like even I was noticing when I was creating content yesterday, and I was doing it from like a different place where it was just bringing me pure pleasure, right? And I wasn't thinking about all these other things. And there was a lot of fear that came up. There was a lot of
Mm,
emotions that was coming up. And I was like, wow, this is so curious. Like I do this all the time. um has the sensation always been here, and what is this really telling me deeper on what's happening at my core wound, and tying it to it is so important. And it's just interesting to notice like how your energy changes throughout the day, and how much, because especially if you tie fear back to a trauma, that trauma is safe, feels like safety for a lot of us in our bodies. It's the comfort zone, so that feels like normal, when
yep.
really you have to take yourself constantly out of it and be like, whoa, shit, that's not normal. I actually, this is me getting to re-regulate and reprogram it. So I'm curious, what are some of your techniques and tips on how you make that shift, going from this is my comfort zone to separating that from that and then re-regulating?
Yeah, I love that. Do you mind share like I love this that you shared that. Do you mind sharing what it was specifically?
Yeah,
And then I
so
can
from
give some tips if like from that. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm working right now in being able to feel pleasure without shame. That I was
Mm,
programmed that when I feel joy, that you're meant to feel guilty or ashamed of it. And
yes.
so I'm learning to create now from a place of like pleasure for myself that just like feels really good. And it felt very unsafe to do it.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, like there was so much guilt and shame that came up.
Dang. I love that. So I'm actually I feel like a lot of us are in the same boat. Like I wish I could say like by raise of hand who feels guilty for like even just us saying guilty pleasure.
For
Like
sure.
even just that programming, right, is like what the hell? But it's like why can't it just be pleasure? Like I definitely, I mean, I grew up Mormon, so I have a
Oh,
bunch
wow.
of pleasure is wrong, period. So it's
Totally.
definitely like undoing that is freaking wild. So it's like for you, because you're creating content and it felt pleasurable and fun and joyful and blissful. So that's probably where something it tricked or it like it triggered your brain to say like, wait, like this isn't right. Like this is unsafe.
Definitely.
Right. And so what do you feel like, and it sounds like I mean you're definitely already, well aware of it and doing the work for it, but do you know like the underlying story or belief behind it of like of the pleasure specifically?
Yes. It's that my pleasure, this is the programming, comes from putting others' needs before my own. That is what I was programmed to feel, is that when I do that, that gets that person to like me, and then that's how I receive love. And
Mm.
versus it doesn't feel safe, I get shamed, or it's wrong when I get a sense of pleasure. There's like some type of punishment that happens.
Damn. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I relate to that big time too. So it's so what is like I was asked like so when you feel pleasure, what do you feel like in your body? Like what is the alarm going off?
Like the shame and the guilty part of it.
Yeah, like what do you feel and where do you feel it?
Definitely like sacral chakra stuff.
Yeah.
I know my mind goes there, but I'm such a clear sentient person too. So yeah, it feels like creaky, and it feels,
Creaky?
yeah, and almost
Mm,
like visualizing it, it almost feels like cobwebs is like the visualization that I often get with it. Like, oh, I haven't, like, this is uncharted territory. I haven't like really been able to like feel into the sensation of pleasure for a bit.
and I feel like and you can tell me because I feel like it's more than sacral though. but does it almost like
Mm.
stop there? I feel like it wants to like
Mm.
almost like move through your body. Do you feel like it kind of like halts, or like there's a wall, or
Definitely.
like, okay. Do you, I mean, then you said clairsentient, so do you feel it like anywhere else, like in your body? Like when you were in that moment of creating the content, what did that feel like? I know you're probably just like in the flow and you're not consciously thinking about it, but where did you feel it?
Yeah, it definitely went up to my heart, and like my heart
Yeah,
felt so expansive.
perfect. And and then when that fear came up, what happened to the heart?
Anxiety, pressure.
And then, and so you better not feel that, because why?
The shame and the guilt is going to come.
And what does that mean about you?
Mm, like I'm not worthy of pleasure, like enjoy that when I do that I'm a quote unquote bad person.
Okay. What's one layer deeper? Like, why can't you, like, if you feel pleasure, what does that mean about you? Like, if you feel
Mm,
into your heart and not so much think about it, because I feel like it lives in your heart too.
mm. Well, I know when I feel like pleasure and joy when I'm creating content from that like open space, I have felt like it actually does reach people on a more authentic and intimate level. Like
Mm,
and that feels more fulfilling that way because I get to experience it as well for myself and I get fed. Because I've been down so many tracks before, basically with this tie I've realized is I can be successful doing it the other way. I have been successful doing
yeah.
it the other way. But it leads to burnout in my body and exhaustion in my body. So I've already been down
Opposite of
that road.
pleasure.
Yes. I've already been down that road. I already know that doesn't work. So now, as I try this new one, it's like the unknown, it's the void, and it
Mm,
feels really scary to be able to trust myself with that power. So,
mm.
yeah, it feels scary to trust the power and the joy and the pleasure that I can experience.
Damn, I love this. I'm getting like freaking tingles. Like I can feel it moving up even just a little bit more. So keep talking about that. So like, so does it feel like uncontrollable, or like what does it, like, is it so expansive that's just like like overtaking, or what else comes up about like that that powerful feeling you are feeling?
When I feel my power, yeah, it feels like, oh, can I contain it?
Mm,
Can I be able to trust this power? Mainly because my past versions of what I thought power was like scary, fear, intimidation. And then also there's like this trust of like, will I be able to maintain it? Because this just seems like a lot of energy that's here.
mm, I understand that. Okay. So so tying that trust, and we've mentioned that a few times talking, so that's definitely a theme here. So trust and pleasure, how do they relate to you?
For me, yeah, that like me being able to ask for more power and being able to get more power is based on the level of how much I trust myself. The more I trust my intuitive gifts, the more that I trust my joy and my pleasure, then the more that I'm able to maintain that power. So it's like, yeah, that's the zone I'm in right now of like molding it.
I love it. And thank you for answering all these. Can I ask you more? I can I ask you
Yeah,
more
I mean, this is
questions?
fun. I thank you for this little healing sesh.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's just like just a conversation of two people just like exploring and dancing with it. Um, so because yeah, I feel like, and I feel like you know this too, right? Is that goes into your most powerful self. Like when you're in pleasure, and then also when you're in pleasure, it makes you more powerful and probably more influential.
Definitely.
So what else comes with pleasure? So not just within your body, but what else comes with it?
Um, it'll get positivity, right? I'll attract the right people, but I'm also going to start attracting people who are going to want to bring me down. The negative comments that always comes. It's so funny how it happens and it works, but it always will come whenever this
Mm-hmm.
like rising happens.
Yeah.
Um, there's a little fear of losing certain relationships. That feels like maybe further down the line. Yeah.
So why shouldn't you feel pleasure?
Not feeling pleasure, then I get to say the same. Then I don't have to deal with the people who may not like me.
So yeah, why is it safe to say? Is it what is not the opposite of pleasure to you? Is it just like neutral? Is it pain? Like what is the opposite to pleasure and for you in this scenario?
Pain.
Mm. So do you like if you're not in pleasure, do you feel in pain? Like if you're not expressing like if you listen to that fear into the anxiety into the constriction, does it feel painful?
Yeah. Yeah. It feels viscerally painful.
Mm. I know it varies, but what average would you say like on a scale of 1 to
Mm.
10, 10 being painful, 1 being pleasurable, like how much pain do you usually feel if you don't follow your heart and joy? In your heart specifically.
Physically, maybe like a 3. But if I'm connecting to all of my bodies, like on a spiritual and emotional level,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be way higher. It'll be like a 10. It becomes no
Ooh.
choice.
Say that last part.
It becomes not a choice.
What do you mean not a choice?
That to even question of whether I would be asking for more power and going down this path of choosing more pleasure versus choosing suffering and staying the same, it's like a no-brainer.
Exactly. So to your body, what feels safe about pain and suffering?
The familiarity of it and what used to be my coping mechanisms and what the past evidence in my life that proved to get the love that I was getting before from that.
Amen. I love it. And so it's like, so what love were you receiving from choosing to suffer?
Conditional love, but very difficult because of the person that I was receiving it from was definitely like a figure in your life that you would receive unconditional love from.
Mm-hmm. So, and I know you know this, but for people listening, right, like it only makes sense that you would choose that. Like we can see from just these series of questions, like it literally feels dangerous for you. It feels unsafe to feel anything but pain and unconditional love and suffering because that's your normal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like pleasure is literally wrong. Like pleasure is no thank you. Pleasure is a threat. Pleasure is what the hell are you doing? Go back to suffering.
Mm.
So with all of your bodies, I like how you brought all that in, right? Because it's not just your physical body. What do you want to, and you might have already done this, but if you had to summarize your past self and even like current self, what does it believe? I know we've already asked this, but if you had to summarize it, what does it want to believe about pleasure? Pleasure is what?
Pleasure is joy, true intimacy, and connecting with my highest and fullest potential.
And what does your old self believe about pleasure? Like why?
Pleasure is conditional and based on putting others' needs before mine and suffering.
Mm. So like, which would you rather believe?
Pleasure is joy. My ticket to my ticket to the heavens.
Ooh, ticket to the heavens. I like that. Do you use that phrase at all?
I don't. Maybe I'll use it.
I like that. So I mean, what does that mean to you? I mean, that stands out to me, like ticket to the heavens.
Um I often visualize my highest self and my goddess self, and I connect with her a lot.
Mm.
So, and I'm very connected to the angelic realm as well. So I connect to my angels a lot. So I always just see like that realm. Take me there.
And so how does pleasure connect to that?
Um, that's I get such a joy from that. I'm very connected to my dreams and in the dream world and visualization. So that's like my happy place that I go to.
Cool. So it's like, how can you bring that into your physical 3D body?
Mm,
From the angelic, from the goddess, because it's like, that's attainable.
totally.
And anyway, we could keep going down the tangent, and I appreciate you so much for like going there. But why I went there is because of the question of well, what do we do? Like, how do we shift? And it's, just questions and prompts. Like for me, and I know so many people probably already shifted just through your example, through listening and through energetics and consciously, unconsciously, of just that subtle awareness of that, like, oh, pleasure is wrong, pleasure is unsafe. And it's like, okay, well, how do I shift that? And then just asking, like, well, what do you want to believe? And then you literally said, like, pleasure is my ticket to the heavens. And pleasure, and what else did you say? Pleasure is
My
like,
connection to joy, intimacy.
yeah, what else
Um,
do you want to, like, what is like completely like just almost like ridiculous? Like, what do you want to believe about pleasure?
um, I don't know. Like honestly, anything that I feel like that I want in life really is connected to it. Like when I think about my manifestations and anything that I want to bring in my life in the future and visions, like that's it.
Mm, is just, and like, it's cool, like, just connecting to that. And I know you know this, right? But it's like, it's all a choice, which is so cool and also a bit daunting,
Mm,
and overwhelming at times. But like, suffering feels safe, so we choose to feel it. But also, like, pleasure, like, and there's so many degrees and facets and expressions of pleasure, right? It's not like, it could be erotic pleasure, like literally getting a massage, tasting food, like, like pleasure looking at a sunset. Like, it's so many facets and degrees and expressions of it. And like, I just appreciate you sharing that, because it's like, I believe that's what life is. Like, even when we talk about fear, is and fear is at the root of our suffering. And so it's like, on this human level, fear is always going to exist because we have physical bodies that want to survive. But when you tap into like the angelic realms, right? Like, why I feel like you feel that pleasure, because like, that's really that all exists, right? Is like, love and pleasure is just like bursting all the time. Um, but here we have polarity and duality and all those fun things, and that's. But how can we even? I think a deeper question beyond that is like, how can we even have pleasure within that, right?
totally.
Not just like the joy, or like, oh my God, I just sold out my course, or I found the love of my life. But even the times the challenges that feel rough, like, how can that context even bring us pleasure in a way too? I feel like that's a deeper lesson. But um I appreciate you like sharing that and going down that tangent, and just to wrap up, I would just give people a prompt of whatever you just discovered yourself through those questions. Um, just top it off of just asking yourself, like, what do you want to believe?
Hmm.
Like, if you feel unsafe with pleasure, if you feel unsafe with success, if you feel unsafe asking for what you want, literally just ask yourself, well, what do I want to believe? And start
Totally.
practicing just exploring your edge. And I imagine you're already doing this of practicing feeling pleasure. Like, how cool of a practice is that? Like, that's your job. Like, that's
Totally.
your, like, that's so cool to like practice pleasure. And then everyone else can practice, like, that's their edge. Like, that's their discomfort. That's their new expression to expand into. Um, yeah, what a beautiful practice to feel more pleasure. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's literally my February commitments. It's all based around pleasure and being safe, like feeling it. And I love that you
Mm,
brought apart like really finding pleasure in those troubling moments. Because the reason why this actually kind of all came up is there was this certain trauma that has come up for me, and it has truly brought me so much pain. And I
mm,
felt like I was so crazy for saying this, and I only shared it with like a couple of my friends in my spiritual community who know me, that there was so much clarity and there was so much empowerment and there was so much amazingness that also came out of it, that like, and the feeling of when you get to really feel like the full depth of the pain, and then you feel so alive in those moments, like you said, like there is so
mm-hmm,
much pleasure in that, like the depth that this has allowed me, even though it
mm,
truly has brought me to my knees, and though it truly has broken me open, and we're on this journey, we're getting broken open so much, but it feels like this layer has been so deep for me. I am so grateful for it because of all the expansion that is here for it, and how it has awakened me to all so many more possibilities that have been there. So I love that you said that, because there truly is like, yes, I love living in like the etherical realm, but like part of that joy and that pleasure is, why am I here anyway? Like, why did I incarnate on this human body, is to experience joy in this body. So I might as well freaking learn how to do it in every single shape and form, and really suck the juice out of each moment of it, which will feel like the polarity of both and.
amen. Right. And that is feeling. And that's what we're here to do and that's intimacy, that's pleasure, that's the bliss we're all trying to get to is like, yeah, can we surrender to that feeling? And it even goes back to like, right, the trust and the out of control feeling of it because it feels unsafe. And then it connects even back to what you said before about even the the like the the infinite dark black um warm womb, like it all connects back to that. And like
Mm.
surrendering to like what you said of like if we're getting broke open or shattered, like how can that even be beautiful just to allow that? Like that's powerful. Like I yeah, like I imagine people like if we let ourselves be, I mean that's part of rebirth too, right? But almost like be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I view it as like a beautiful destruction. And
Definitely.
hopefully we don't have too much of that all the time, right? Where our reality is disintegrated, but like because we need some sense of um, safety in our reality. But yeah, how cool is that to just be able to like lean into that? Like I'm just feeling into that, and that feels powerful, and which is completely the opposite of like what we think power is, like you mentioned.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, gosh, you were right. I think we got all the golden nuggets out of here, and I'm really excited for our community to listen to all of this. And thank you so much for your just time and wisdom. I know I want just one more short question before we close, and can share how our community can connect with you. And possibly maybe this is like a little forecast for a next episode that we could do. But I'm so curious because you are someone who's devoted to dharma. So I imagine that a lot of your clients will probably be more male, which I find so fascinating, like how the spiritual world is really changing this. And I think for our community, which is mainly women here, but not all, it could be really inspiring for them to hear like, what is the shifts that you're noticing in consciousness of this just not being like an arena for women but also men. And I know that's like not nothing new here. Like we know that's been
Mhm.
changing, but I just would love to hear it from like your perspective because you're working with men and like you've worked in finance, so I'm sure that's like such a shift and transformation that's happening. Um, but yeah, I just want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening in its divine timing. I remember getting questions right of like, how do we help men? Da, 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 da. It's like you just allow them to do it, right? Like that's part of why men don't want to do it. Like if they feel controlled or forced or anything, right? Like a nagging wife, like why aren't you doing it? And then it's like, well, I don't want to do it even more. So it's like it's happening naturally and beautifully. Even if you just see more people share, like Aaron Rodgers sharing about ayahuasca, and I've talked to someone recently who's pretty high profile person, and they're scared about opening up about their journey. And, he's a very successful person. And so it's definitely happening behind the scenes. And it's like we are starting to see more and more. And it's has been happening, right? But it's just accelerating. And so it is happening. It has been happening. And now it's just happening like at a rate that we can see it. Um, like it's just becoming more commonplace and like accepted. And even if it's maybe not at the depth that we can go to here, it's still just the fact that you can talk about emotions like like there's just more and more podcasts and like sports people or business people. And even just if it's like there are businesses now who have like even if it's coming from probably a standpoint of like they have to do it for like employee satisfaction, at least they're still like caring about people, even if they're kind of being forced to, right? Of like caring about people first and like profit second, and like knowing that those can coexist together. So, like, from what I've seen, and definitely in the past, I would have said, like, come on, men, like, let's go. Like, we need you. Like, be more vulnerable. And like, that's still there, but I just feel like it's happening. And all we need to do is continue just to live by example and do our part and not try and force anybody. Like kind of one of the first things we talked about is like if we live by example, like people will be inspired by our results, by our happiness, by our businesses, by our joy, by our pleasure. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to. I mean, like we just mentioned, like people are going to choose suffering because it feels safe. And but that's not our job in this incarnation to or any incarnation, I believe, but that's why we came here, like, is the freedom of choice. And so we can only control ourselves. And so if we continue just to take care of ourselves and be an example, I feel like that will inspire not only men, but everyone else to rise to themselves, into their truth, into their power, into their most loving selves.
Hmm, love that. Thank you so, so much for everything that you shared. And I already will link in the show notes to follow the Fear Guy on Instagram. You have such great nuggets on there as well. I love the wisdom that you share. And how else can our community connect with you and work with you further?
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, go follow me on Instagram, the Fear Guy. My website is feeling-free.com. I have a course and it's 197 bucks. It's literally like the process we just went through of discovering what is the root of your fear. It takes you through a tracking process. It gives you intuitive prompts. So all the questions I just basically asked, it gives you so you can figure out um, what is the root and what is your belief, and then it gives you the prompts to reframe it and to reprogram it. So it's pretty freaking awesome. I must say, and people are getting awesome results. So you can go look at that if you want. I work with people one on one. Every once in a while, I'll do group coaching things. But yeah, just I have a podcast. It's called The Fear Alchemist, and just come join and message me if you want, or just observe. do whatever you feel called to do.
I love it. I'll have all of that linked in the show notes. Thank you again so much. And thank you, everyone who tuned in with open hearts and stayed to the end. Love you all and see you next time.
Thank you.